Just as the first 4 seals belonged together and the final 3 were slightly different, the same applies to the trumpets. Let's examine the first 4 trumpets together now, as they're relatively straightforward. The first angel blew his trumpet, and hail and fire mixed with blood were thrown down on the earth. 1/3 of the earth was set on fire, 1/3 of the trees were burned, and all the green grass was burned. The first judgment is hail and fire mixed with blood falling from the sky. Now what would cause hail and fire mixed with blood to fall from the sky? Some suggest a volcanic eruption. That would certainly explain the image of fire falling from the sky, and there have been previous examples of blood-red coloured rain falling to earth, possibly as a result of the dust and ash being thrown into the air and mixing with the water as it falls from the clouds. Volcanoes are also known to produce spectacularly violent thunderstorms, and this could account for the hail. Others speculate that this image of fire raining from the sky refers to a meteor shower, whereby the Earth will be bombarded by asteroids. A third theory is that solar flares could be to blame. Physicist Professor Michio Kaku recently stated that the sun is having a temper tantrum and it's getting worse and worse. My greatest fear is the Earth getting hit by a large solar flare and all hell could break loose. Whatever it is, we're clearly looking at a massive natural disaster, almost certainly some kind of storm which will have a devastating impact on the planet. 1/3 of the Earth's surface is going to be scorched by fire. Then the second angel blew his trumpet, and a great mountain of fire was thrown into the sea. 1/3 of the water in the sea became blood, 1/3 of all things living in the sea died, and 1/3 of all the ships on the sea were destroyed. When the second trumpet is blown, what definitely appears to be a massive volcano erupts and then falls into the sea. This has a devastating impact on 1/3 of the sea, killing the marine life and destroying all the ships in the area. The main feature of this judgment is that 1/3 of the sea turns to blood. We have occasionally seen similar events to this on a smaller scale. When colonies of algae grow out of control in the oceans, they can occasionally produce harmful algae blooms or red tides. These blooms have harmful effects on people, fish, shellfish, marine mammals and birds. Indeed, these blooms are often fatal. The best guess I can give is that the volcano falling into the sea will somehow fuel one of these blooms, which will destroy the sea life. The blood of that sea life may then also play a large role in turning the water red. Then the third angel blew his trumpet, and a great star fell from the sky, burning like a torch. It fell on 1/3 of the rivers and on the springs of water. The name of the star was Bitterness. It made 1/3 of the water bitter, and many people died from drinking the bitter water. John describes a star falling from the sky, burning like a torch. Stars can often represent angels in biblical imagery, but in this case, his description is almost certainly that of a literal meteorite. When it hits the ground, it seems to have some kind of contaminating effect on the fresh water supply, and 1/3 of the Earth's drinkable water becomes polluted. Many people will die from drinking that water. Then the fourth angel blew his trumpet, and 1/3 of the sun was struck, and 1/3 of the moon, and 1/3 of the stars, and they became dark, and 1/3 of the day was dark, and also 1/3 of the night. When the fourth trumpet is blown, there are more problems with the sun, moon, and stars. Since the sun had already been described as going dark, and the moon had already been described as turning blood red back at the sixth seal, we must deduce that those previous events were only temporary solar and blood moon lunar eclipses. Such things are relatively common, so the sixth seal eclipses must have been unusual in some way to signify the transition out of the tribulation and into the day of wrath, but no lasting damage will have been done at that time. Here, however, it seems that there is severe and permanent damage done to the sun, moon, and stars, which all lose 1/3 of their brightness. Not only will this create more darkness on the earth, but obviously a diminished sun will lead to a drop in temperatures too. Since the temperatures on the earth are finely tuned for life to flourish, a drop of a third will cause significant problems in many areas and leave currently habited places uninhabitable. It's also worth noting that the problems unleashed by the 7 seals will still be rampant and increasing in force throughout the 7 trumpets. There's no mention of the 4 horsemen being called back or the broken seals being resealed. So all the while there will be an increase in false prophets, famines, economic crises, natural disasters and wars. Our timeline now looks something like this. The judgments that come with the final 3 trumpets are slightly different from the first 4, and they're harder to interpret. They are specifically described as 3 woes or 3 terrors that are going to be inflicted upon the earth. John says, "Then I looked and I heard a single eagle crying loudly as it flew through the air, 'Terror, terror, terror to all who belong to this world because of what will happen when the last 3 angels blow their trumpets.'" Clearly, the final 3 judgments are going to step things up a notch. As we explore them, notice that whereas the first 4 trumpets describe problems with the natural world, the final 3 herald problems which are primarily rooted in the supernatural world. That's why the Bible will use a lot of metaphorical imagery for these final trumpets. It's often describing unseen things that we have no natural reference points for. Don't be intimidated by the imagery though, it just takes a little patience and exploration to attain the meanings. The 5th trumpet is described like this. "Then the 5th angel blew his trumpet, and I saw a star that had fallen to earth from the sky, and he was given the key to the shaft of the bottomless pit. When he opened it, smoke poured out as though from a huge furnace, and the sunlight and air turned dark from the smoke. Then locusts came from the smoke and descended on the earth, and they were given power to sting like scorpions. They were told not to harm the grass or plants or trees, but only the people who did not have the seal of God on their foreheads. They were told not to kill them, but to torture them for 5 months with pain like the pain of a scorpion sting. In those days people will seek death, but will not find it. They will long to die, but death will flee from them. The locusts looked like horses prepared for battle. They had what looked like gold crowns on their heads, and their faces looked like human faces. They had hair like women's hair, and teeth like the teeth of a lion. They wore armor made of iron, and their wings roared like an army of chariots rushing into battle. They had tails that stung like scorpions, and for 5 months they had the power to torment people. Their king is the angel from the bottomless pit. His name in Hebrew is Abaddon, and in Greek, Apollyon, the destroyer. The first terror is past, but look, 2 more terrors are coming. Iron-clad locusts with hair like women and teeth like lions. See how there is a noticeable step up in the difficulty of the imagery. So let's walk through it very carefully. Firstly, John sees a star that had fallen to earth from the sky, holding a key. What is this star? Well, in Scripture, stars metaphorically represent angels, and since the star is called a he and is seen to be performing the actions of a personality, namely unlocking the bottomless pit, we can safely assume that this is indeed an angel rather than a literal star. Some try to pin his identity down in greater detail and suggest that this is Satan. Certainly Satan is described as a falling star in other parts of the Bible, but this is not him. Indeed, towards the end of Revelation, we'll see the same angel, the one who holds the keys to the bottomless pit, grabbing Satan to throw him in there. So this is a distinct character. Revelation doesn't name him, so his identity is actually not very important. The point is just that he opens up the bottomless pit and releases a plague of locusts from within. That brings us on to the next puzzling part. What are these bizarre-sounding locusts actually depicting? They are described as having the hair of women, the teeth of lions, armor of iron, and human-like faces. We're also told that, unlike real locusts which cause chaos with vegetation, these metaphorical locusts will cause chaos with people. Clearly, these are not literal descriptions of locusts, but are metaphorical and grotesque pictures of something else. The big clue as to what they are is in the fact that they are released from a place called the bottomless pit. The bottomless pit is actually identified in several other passages of the Bible as a prison where evil or demonic spirits are currently being detained until the day of judgment. Jude refers to the pit when he says, "And I remind you of the angels who did not stay within the limits of authority God gave them, but left the place where they belonged. God has kept them securely chained in prisons of darkness, waiting for the great day of judgment." Peter talks about the pit, calling it Tartarus, when he says, "For God did not spare even the angels who sinned. He threw them into Tartarus, in gloomy pits of darkness, where they are being held until the day of judgment." When Jesus was casting out a group of demons called Legion in Galilee, remember how they pleaded with him not to send them to the pit. Luke records it like this: "As soon as the demon-possessed man saw Jesus, he shrieked and fell down in front of him. Then he screamed, 'Why are you interfering with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? Please, I beg you, don't torture me,' for Jesus had already commanded the evil spirit to come out of him. This spirit had often taken control of the man. Even when he was placed under guard and put in chains and shackles, he simply broke them and rushed out into the wilderness, completely under the demon's power. Jesus demanded, 'What is your name?' 'Legion,' he replied, for he was filled with many demons. The demons kept begging Jesus not to send them into the bottomless pit. The bottomless pit is a place of unfathomable depth and darkness. The Greek suggests a kind of shaft or well, and both Peter and Jude seem to allude to the fact that many of the evil spirits who are detained there are being punished for a very specific sin a long time ago. This could refer to some of those who joined Satan's rebellion in heaven before the dawn of time, but perhaps more likely, it probably refers to those angels who had sexual relations with women to produce the Nephilim in Genesis 6:4. This would also explain why those evil spirits are constantly looking for human bodies to inhabit. Either way, the highest ranking angel currently being detained in the bottomless pit is called Abaddon or Apollyon, which means the destroyer. There's no reason to believe that Abaddon is Satan, as some suppose. Indeed, quite the opposite. The Bible makes it clear that Satan does not reside in the pit right now and will not be thrown into it until much later. Therefore, Abaddon, the beast from the pit, appears to be a distinct character. The fact that he is named is also significant. Remember his name for later. Both Jude and Peter specify that the evil spirits in the pit are being held until the day of judgment. And here, as the fifth trumpet is blown, that day has arrived. We are in the day of wrath, or the day of judgment. Abaddon leads the horde of demons out of the unlocked pit and into the world, where they are given permission to torture and torment, but not to kill. They will most likely cause this torment by possessing the bodies of the godless, just like Legion had done to the man in Galilee. That man had become so mentally troubled that he went insane, running naked into the wilderness and living in a cemetery. These evil spirits who were confined to the pit until this moment will inflict similar torment on the people in the last days. They will cause emotional anguish, mental distress, restlessness, and severe depression in the people of the world. Sometimes the worst pain is internal, but demons are also very capable of inflicting physical harm too. Indeed, self-harm or cutting often has a demonic root. So severe will the misery and madness be that people will actually long to die to escape it. Remember when God allowed Saul to be tormented by an evil spirit in 1 Samuel 16 because of his disobedience? Saul could only find relief when David played his harp. The people in the last days will be similarly tormented, but will find no such relief. The Bible says that the torture will last for 5 whole months, or 150 days. That's the length of time of the fifth trumpet. 5 months, incidentally, is the same length of time that Noah's flood lasted in Genesis 7:24. As in the days of Noah, indeed. Finally, the Bible makes it clear that these evil spirits are allowed to touch only the people who do not have the seal of God on their foreheads. In other words, the 144,000 will be spared this calamity. The fact that God can and does set such strict boundaries on the activities of the demons reminds us just how much he is still in control. Down on earth it will seem like all hell is broken loose, but actually everything is being enacted just as God decreed on the scroll. It's a bit like the book of Job, where God allows Satan to cause suffering for him and his family, but sets very tight limits on just how far Satan can go. God always sets the boundaries. God is always in control.